Hello, hello. Kelsey here, founder of Como. Welcome to Jelyn's story. Jelyn joins us from Florida today, and she is not only one of our incredible moms, she's also a licensed psychologist who works with families, youth, and school systems to address varied educational challenges, including adjustment and ADHD. So we've got two really interesting perspectives coming into play here. So Jelyn, first off, thank you so much for joining us. And second off, I'm going to pass it right over to you if you can tell us a bit about Jaden's background, about, just give
Sure.
us a little bit of history with his school and learning, set the stage for us.
Sure. So, our son Jaden, he is currently 14. He is about to complete the eighth grade. Was a very solid learner, I would say, early elementary years. So, anywhere from like kindergarten, basically till about fourth grade. He was one that kind of thrived on learning and, is a very curious person. And it wasn't until about fifth grade, sixth grade where, he was starting to be exposed to kind of middle school curriculum and started to hit it's no longer kind of an organic, I get this. There needs to be some kind of effort, maybe a little bit of try this and that. There was a little bit of challenge. And so we started to see that around fifth grade. And then, excuse me. And then so when he hit middle school, which here in Florida, middle school starts at sixth grade, we saw a pretty immediate kind of change with his relationship with learning. I think he was overwhelmed by just the magnitude of having all separate classes, different expectations with teachers. And one thing that concerned us was his confidence in, his abilities to learn quickly then almost had him shut down. So, Jaden would really do well academically. I would say within probably like a 4-month span, we just kind of saw him plummet and have more erratic grades. So that's kind of what led us to you guys.
Wow. And Jelyn, so I imagine that was concerning to see in such a short period of time. Did you know off the bat, like, was he communicating about it's hard with different subjects, like these things that you had shared? Was this the obvious, kind of cause of it? Did he know, for example, too, that he was struggling with learning for the first time?
I think he knew, but he wasn't forward about it, right? It was and this is where it became a frustration for us. Him kind of acknowledging that he was struggling was more of an avoidance. So it kind of became a lot of missings, a lot of, okay, yeah, I'm doing it. And then we'd find out the latter that he did not. There would be no, don't worry, I got this. And then, later on we'd see. So it became a very policing kind of relationship that we would start to get into it. Are you lying to me? And that kind of combative type of relationship over the course of sixth grade. That really began to concern us. And then our relationship kind of changed, right? So no longer was it, I feel like a supportive, like we're in this together. It almost started to feel like, all right, we needed to keep you on guard, and kind of line out consequences. Him feeling like he needed to, almost like game, like, okay, I'll say this, or here, I'll show you that. And then, and I know we could see the observations of how stressed he was, but in terms of us like talking to him about it, or even trying to give him a lot of, I think our early interventions was, all right, so we're going to manage your time. You need to do this here, right? Show me the list. I want you to complete these right now, things like that. And that would be very hit or miss. Like sometimes, yeah, he'd get a little bit accomplished and you could see the relief. And then a lot of times, there would be a dragging of his feet. There would be a lot of fights, between us. And I could just see more and more, he was just becoming a less confident learner, which was not really, I think, if I think about early age, that wasn't who he was.
Yeah.
So that's what
It's
concerned us.
Yeah, no kidding. And the way you've just described it, Jelyn, it's so interesting actually how you just kind of told that part of his story because it's quite vivid about the learning, about his natural, he really enjoys these different things. And then, hey, things get hard and we start to see some of that procrastination. And really interesting because a lot of students do this, but especially with our boys, we often see it really common with, but it's fine. It's that downplaying. It's like they don't want to actually admit that anything's going on
Right.
until months, sometimes years go by, and it's just like it just sinks lower because
Right.
deep down it's eating at them.
Sure. Yeah. And another thing I would see with him is a huge fear of any subject. It was like a huge fear of anything that he wasn't good at. Right. So it was more the subjects that he actually liked or felt he did well in, those would be the ones he would kind of be more on top of. And then the ones that he would struggle with, like he almost I mean, I think right before we came to you, it was almost like I'm just not gonna go, to deal with those subjects at all, because I don't want to demonstrate that I fail.
Totally. And who can blame him? This is something, oh, Jelyn, I feel like I could probably talk to you for like 2 hours about this. I won't, don't worry. But I just think it's so interesting because even as of late, we've been having a lot of conversations. I feel like I've been screaming from the rooftops about easy school. When it's easy, getting easy A's, all of these things are actually a red flag. And it's really dangerous for kids to grow up thinking they're good at stuff versus bad at things for so many reasons. But one of them, they don't like the things they're not good at, when really they're just not accustomed to learning. They're not learning the stuff, they're just getting it naturally, right? So it's just, it has a whole host of negative. Anyway, what you just described seems to really capture some of those dangers. But luckily, I think, well, relatively luckily, you caught this early because like sometimes this happens in high school or sometimes even college. So you guys are seeing this kind of downward spiral with Jayden. I think the loss of confidence sounds like it was really hard to watch. When did you guys, you mentioned the early interventions with you kind of trying to impose, which I'm not surprised about how that went, but what else did you guys try to
right?
To
well, we did a lot of things. I mean, obviously with my profession, so yeah, I tried to structure it, tried to give him some interventions. I mean, I do work with youth and adults that have difficulty with executive functioning. So it would be interesting to me because I have worked with individuals with certain kinds of strategies and skills. And so, I kind of took it upon myself to try and spearhead certain interventions, but I just noticed, because he's my son, because I'm his mom, and you touched upon it earlier, I think whether it's because it was just that inclination of he didn't feel comfortable showing or being in a space where he didn't feel like he can show competence, right? So I almost feel like any intervention, any kind of, hey, let's look at these materials, let's do these kind of exercises, just to kind of even bring some fun to it, he was very, very opposed to. So some early interventions were also, we would deal with mental health. We noticed that, with procrastination and anxiety, like avoidance, we tried to, have interventions in that respect, and that would help. We noticed that would help, but ultimately I noticed he just didn't know. And I don't think, especially that transition into middle school, there's not a lot of tools on how to learn learning. It's very, the curriculum is, and of course with all these annual tests and these review, like end of the year exam, a lot of it is, what is your score? That's a lot of how the curriculum is driven. It's okay, so where are their scores? Even if you look at with technology, the teachers, they show it on a website what is due and what's not due. And so part of the grades are they doing the work, right? So you could, like, over a 24-hour period of time, if they have missings, they could have an F. The next day they could have like a B, right? So I think that's interesting, right? So it almost kind of creates this energy of, well, what do I got to do to change that letter? Right? It's just geared towards that. It's like, all right, this is my letter. Okay, that letter is, the grade in that course is fine. And it's just a lot of maneuvering rather than this kind of flow of problem solving, of, just almost being process oriented, right? So that I could see he was still struggling with. He just didn't know. Like, okay, yeah, he was trying to not procrastinate anymore, but he did not have the tool set to know how to break things down into pieces, right? To be able to know how, I think, well, once he would feel confident enough to sit there and start taking in the information, he just didn't know how to organize everything, right? Or even assess what he knows versus what he doesn't know. Like all of those things we could start to, after we tried to address his anxiety, which I think was an aspect, all those other things remained, right? And so luckily, and I think, with the algorithms of social media, I was getting a lot of different kind of ads about, this can help your youth, or these can help your students. And then I remember seeing, I forget, it was this video that that Como posted. It was like an hour-long thing. And if, your student meets these kind of behaviors, I think it was like 5 things, and I asked, Jaden, I was like, hey, would you watch this with me? And he did. And we watched it. And one of the things that I appreciated that made us sign up with you is I could see with him that he's like, yeah, this is how I feel, and him feeling like, wow, this, like, I could see it in his face, like, wow, this is not just me. Like, I'm just not this, whatever, fill in the blank negative aspect about himself, right? Like that he could hear, this whole presentation about, wow, there are other kids or other teenagers, kind of going through this whole process. And so he was open to that, because I think the student and the parent have to be open to the consultation, right? So he was like, I'm willing to, can we set up something and let's hear what, they have to say about what they can offer. So I think that's what led us to you guys.
I love that, Jelyn. I don't think I knew that you guys watched it together, which is awesome. So there you go. Go ahead and watch our webinar with your child. But also I want to highlight, I think you hit on 2 things that are so important. Number one, the process oriented aspect of like, how are we learning? Most students and a lot of parents don't think that connects necessarily with procrastination. And I think you just did such a great job. I just wanted to really drive that home for anyone listening. It's such an invaluable takeaway. Procrastination is not just because your kid's lazy. Like, there are parts that could play into it for sure. But so often that procrastination comes with negative feelings associated towards the task at hand, which often stems from, I don't know how to do it. Nobody likes to do stuff they don't know how to do that makes them feel dumb. All right. So when they know the process, we see less procrastination. But Jelyn, I think that was so important. And the other one about the stigma. And again, a lot of kids, especially a lot of boys, they don't want to acknowledge what they're feeling because they don't know, is it just me? Am I dumb? And, I don't want to suppose Jaden's self-talk in any way, but just that general of, oh, there's this thing out there. It's not just me. Let them know that there is a community, a whole space out there of people who are just like, oh yeah, no, this is really common. It's not a big deal. We can totally fix it. And really just get rid of some of that, self-doubt or like negative self-talk or whatever, and replace it with, oh, I just have to learn how to do it. And then it's fine. And that is just so key. So cool. So Jelyn, you found us on Facebook. I love how you said the algorithm put us together. Amazing. And so like when you guys initially came on board, was there anything in particular, we always say like we're specializing in learning how to learn and in giving kids these tools. Was there anything in specific you guys were after, or was it mostly like kind of just that, like giving him those learning skills?
I'm trying to think, right? Because I feel like it was all the things surrounding executive functioning. So the organization component I knew was where he struggled. To review how he is learning, that was the other thing. And the whole growth mindset stuff. And I see, so here's what's interesting, right? Like I said before, I know this material, I know it works, and I would try and go over this stuff with him. So I think when we tried this intervention, it was me surrendering to the idea that it can't be me. it can't be me to go over this with him. He needs to feel his own sense of independence and his own sense of self-competency. And that was the thing that I think was also a drive for us, is that he, obviously we're on board and we're support, but this was something that he could engage in by himself. And I almost feel like that was a very important component that really shifted immediately once we signed in, is that, with your staff and the amounts of supports and the way that you guys gear it, it's always it's supportive and positive, but it kind of falls back on them. And you guys say it in such an encouraging way. I think when I voice it, it's more like, it's more like, you need to be doing this. Like what? But the way that the way that you guys frame it, it's almost more inquisitive, and it helps him get to a place where he can challenge himself. And the one thing that I could see with him is he thrived off of just feeling like I'm exceeding whatever we're talking about. I'm able to start exceeding again. And that was just such a beautiful thing to see in him immediately. That shifted him. And again, it's not perfect. He's still a teenager. He still, has to overcome different distractions and reprioritize, and habits take a long time to build. And so his old habits, of course, they still kind of come around, but I definitely feel like he has the tools to think about this process. And no longer was he hiding behind I have to do well or else I'm a fit. Like if I'm doing bad, then I am this, right? It's okay, I'm struggling. It's not who I am. It's what adjustments, what strategy didn't I use? You know what I mean? It more became the process, right? About, okay, then maybe I need to look at these adjustments.
That's so key, that shifting from what's wrong with me or I am, those identity statements, versus the objective. And actually, Jelyn, this reminds me of the workshop, but like using it as data. Like, oh, I got this bad grade. What does this tell me? Because it's definitely not about you as a person or a thinker. It's definitely about the process and how can we learn about how to bridge it. So with that said, about the process and kind of some of these skills and strategies, was there anything in particular for Jayden that you felt, did make one of the bigger differences for him that he really took to, or that he felt was most helpful?
I think the whole, using a calendar and those kinds of things to map out things, I think that was a huge difference. The other thing that really stood out to me was self-advocacy. So, and I remember this distinctly, when we were trying to work with him to get him to reach out to his teachers, to get him to even just ask a question, right, through email. And mind you, like a lot of this was in the midst of the pandemic. So a lot of students, it was more like email driven communication than anything, right? He was just so resistant. And one of the immediate things that happened, the magic that is what you guys do, is I'm hearing him like, okay, I need to email this, or, I've reached out to this person, or I'm going to ask this question. Like it was almost even sometimes a mindful schedule, like, okay, this coming week, and that just floored us, because he made he was so scared about doing it before. And then he just kind of like, it just became, and I think it was like the resourcefulness, like what resources do you have, like how you guys framed it. Like I don't know, he just took to that, like, oh, okay, yeah, like,
of course,
yeah, it was, and so that was huge. That was a really big difference. I'm trying to think of other things, but really those really floored me and it happened very quickly.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is good is that there's peers, right? So it's almost like a cohort that he is working with, all at different levels, different stages of life. And I think that can be inspirational or normalizing, right? I thought that was a great aspect of the program as well.
That's so awesome, Jelyn. I love all of those. And it's so true. I mean, the calendar, it's just one of those heavy hitters from day one. It's one of the reasons, like week 1, 2, like it's like, let's get this set up, because we always talk about you can have the best intentions and you can have the best tools even for engaging, but if you don't know how to like carve out the time and the space to actually engage with yourself as a learner and do your schoolwork, then the rest kind of falls by the wayside. And it's so funny, kids who did Jayden ever use a calendar before?
No.
Okay, I'm glad. Perfect. I love that you laughed and said no. Because so many kids, the ones who are like, they've never used one. A lot of them are like, I don't need one. Like they're the most like you would just never really expect them to, are often the ones who like they set it up and they're like, oh, this is great. Like just
well,
like
I guess okay, let me take that back. And I know in his elementary school, they had planners and they would make them like at the end of the day or whatever, write down things in the planner. But I don't think he looked at it. It was almost like, okay, today's my homework. So this is what I have to write, right? It wasn't okay, next week, these are the things that I need to work on. Yeah, so it wasn't strategic. And I also think, it's just using Google and technology that it was more like paper pencil. So that was a big difference because then he was starting to use alerts and things like that. So it kind of took it to a different level.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so Jelyn, bring us to kind of today, present, how is Jaden doing right now? So he's learned some of these skills. Obviously he is a teenager, nothing is perfect. And I like, again, you guys, learning takes time. It's a lifelong endeavor. What we're talking about is some of these foundations, right? To start to feel confident, to know what to do. But anyway, yeah, how is he doing? How is his situation with school?
I mean, I think, yeah, definitely better. Always a work in progress. It's funny because he and I definitely know that he wants to do this independently, right? So we're trying to find the balance of, okay, especially now that there isn't, that support of Como, now it's us, right? We're trying to use these tools and I'm trying to see what would be a healthy balance for me to see these things alongside him. So I remember we kind of had like a incident where, okay, well, I'm going to just review where you are in space and time. And we kind of went back and forth. And then at one point he was just like, all right, so just let's make this the deadline. So next Friday, right? So I can kind of see what I'm going to do and space it out. And then on that Friday, you and I will look at it. And so I thought, that was good because that would have been like a whole evening. Conversation of like, okay, let's check out where you are, and us battling and him having kind of this meltdown. That's normally how it would go. We still kind of got a little bit frustrated at each other, but the change of, well, okay, how about this, right? I'm going to set my calendar, and it's funny because it's this upcoming at the end of this week. So I even mentioned it to him like the other day. I was like, hey, this Friday. And he's like, yep, this Friday. Look, so that's different, right? That he and I are trying to find a way where we're collaborating and he's holding himself accountable, right? I think I'm trying to think, I still think he's learning how, when he works on an ongoing basis versus sporadic, like the difference of what that looks like. The thing that definitely has stood the test of time, which I am very thankful for, is he's very future oriented more so now. So one of the things, and I don't know, so he got asked to be in the IB program for high school, or, he was just invited. So we were very hands off, like, all right, it's up to you. Like, we didn't want to, and at one point we're just kind of like, maybe that's too, like, I don't want him to feel so stressed because that's what we worry about. And he stuck to it. Like, he was like, no, I'm going to do it. No, that's like, it came more from him, where normally it would be coming more from us, like reminding him to apply. You know what I mean? Like, so it was interesting. And I think things like that, where he's trying to think, well, if I'm in IB, I can qualify for scholarships. And then, so I just like, then I don't know if that's, I'm sure it's Como, but also helping him mature, that he is starting to think of his own, long-term goals. So that's kind of where we are now.
Jelyn, that's amazing. And for those of you who might not know, the IB program is the International Baccalaureate. It's like a generally competitive and extremely rigorous academic environment. So I just have to, the fact that, and I know we are coming up on our time here, but just I want to zoom out from like what you shared about this bright little engaged, curious little kid who came into high school and just kind of had this bit of a tumble, right, downward spiral, losing some of his confidence. everything you described and into now for himself being like, yes, I want to do this academic, this rigorous thing. And it's hard. Like everybody knows that whoever knows the IB knows like this is signing up for a really challenging educational journey. It gave me a bit of chills to be like, this kid has the confidence to be like, yeah, of course I can do this. And he can. That's right. The best part. He totally can. Why not?
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree
wow.
with you.
Jelyn, that's so wonderful. So I have one final question for you. What would you tell parents? What advice would you give to parents who are currently in the suck, as we call it, like who are currently facing kids who are struggling, crying, fighting, worried about them? What's like the number one or two things that you would advise?
I mean, let's see, in terms of advice, I just think okay. So as a parent, one of the things that I think initially, without having signed up, we're kind of like, well, if we invest in this, how do we know that this will actually address, right? Like, it's one of those things, like I can put money into something and, whatever, it's just going to be, 8 weeks later, or whatever, and I think we really were like, you know what, why not invest in him? We just kind of were like, no, he's worth it. Let's do it. I think, to any parent, it is worth it. These are skills, even if, regardless of where they are in their education, these are lifelong life skills that I think all people can become more competent, more self-sufficient, right? It just helps change their perspective of how to address life, that I don't think, for whatever reason, educationally, they don't always gain. And so for that alone, I think it can be very beneficial. And the other thing that I would say is it can change pretty immediately, right? Like, I think that because it's this outside entity, and I think that the youth are able to engage in this on kind of their own terms, right? It allows them this sense of accomplishment that's independent enough, and it allows you guys to be more supportive. So I feel like the parent-child relationship, it kind of gets recalibrated, and you can actually be a parent and work together again, rather than this, you're trying to be everything to your child, and I'm going to police it, I'm going to be your teacher. Like, it's just so much. And it definitely didn't make me feel bonded to Jayden anymore when we were trying to do it like that. So at least now we have that again, where he feels, like we have a relationship, a stronger one. I'm not going to say we totally didn't have one, but you get what I'm saying. Like, I think it repaired some of that damage that was starting to just slowly, progressively continue to deteriorate.
Wow, Jelyn, I'm sure I'm going to clip that, what you just shared, and just broadcast that like repeatedly every week. That's so huge. I think it's such a inspiring and hopeful message that not only do things, they don't have to suck, they don't have to be such a source of conflict, and that once you make that decision and start to bring, it's learning how to learn, right? Like we're the vehicle, we have this curriculum, we have these tools, but it's really the student and the parent who come in and decide to learn how to use them and affect change, within a matter of days or a couple of weeks in their home and in their lives. And that's just, Jelyn, that's such pure gold. I know what you shared resonates with so many families and is definitely giving a lot of hope to families. So thank you for coming on and sharing over your lunch break, no less. We appreciate it so much. Anybody watching, this whole story started with Jelyn watching that webinar, booking that call with the team. If that's you, go to comoconsulting.com/get started now. We're on standby to speak with you if you and your kid are ready for change, or at least to start exploring what that could look like. And Jelyn, thank you again. And everybody else, we will catch you on our next video. Take care, everybody.
And thank you guys so much. All right, bye-bye.